All right, I think we are live. So, what's up, everyone? Hopefully, you guys are all hearing me okay and can see me okay. Hopefully, we don't have any issues on this live stream. The last one went pretty well, though. So, another month, another live stream. And like any other live streams, I'm going to be doing this for about 2 hours. And the super chat questions are always going to take priority, but I'm going to try and answer as many questions here as I can. We'll just get right into it. I see we already have a few people that have joined us. Thank you all for joining. Hopefully, you're all having a pretty good weekend, as best as can be possible, I guess, with everything still going on. We have Lucas here ask the first question. He asked if Kia is going to be bringing the 11-passenger version of the Sedona to North America. Honestly, I didn't even know there was an 11-passenger version of the Sedona. That's kind of crazy. I don't think there's much demand for something that large here in the States. No one else offers anything that big aside from like the commercial vans, I think. So I doubt they would, but I guess anything's possible to see, once they finally give us the info on the US version of the Sedona. Piece of Bacon asks what I think of the 400Z. And, I kind of elaborated in the weekly update all my thoughts on it, but the Cliff Notes version is I really like the styling. To me, it wasn't a disappointment that it's based on a 370Z because that's what all the rumors were suggesting for a long time. And I think the more sports cars in the world, the better. And so, I love that, they upgraded to a completely new engine, has a really nice interior. And so I hope they can just get it on sale pretty soon. But and I also hope that they price it reasonably so that lots of people buy it. And but I'm excited for it. I think it's going to be great. I'm excited to hopefully drive it at some point as well. All right. So Stefan says, hey, you missed football. It's NFL Sunday. Don't miss that. Yeah, I'm not into football really. So, but I apologize if this is poor timing for some of you. Whenever I do these on the weekends, I like trying to do them in the middle of the day just because that way I hopefully can catch some of my European fans that are still awake and able to join us here. So, I apologize if this is on a Super Bowl Sunday or, a football Sunday for you. Hopefully you can always go back and rewatch this as well too. You can always watch these after the fact they record and you can kind of watch them later even if you can't interact. Isaac asks what Infiniti needs to be saved. I think they need really good marketing, like lots of marketing that's effective and gets people's attention. Otherwise though, I think they just need new products. That's the number one thing. Everything's kind of stale in their lineup, honestly. And although they're very good looking cars, that's just not enough. That and really good lease deals. Because around here in my area, there are actually a lot of Infinitis running around because we have a dealership pretty close by and the lease deals seem to be really competitive, which is I think what gets a lot of people into them because they're like, oh, it's a luxury brand that I can get for pretty cheap. And so a lot of people just go for it without really doing a lot of research as far as, if it's actually the best or anything. And so I think that kind of helps Infiniti a little bit, but I mean, the sales don't lie. They're not doing great. And so hopefully they can, get the new products. And they're saying they're going to have, a bunch of new stuff here coming in the next 24 months or so. So hopefully that is enough to, revive them. And it sounds like they're very committed to Infiniti though. So I don't think they're going to go anywhere. All right, we got a lot of people joining us here. Lots of questions. I appreciate everyone hanging out here. So another question here. When is the Taos coming? Langston Reese asks. So that is the subcompact Volkswagen. And I think they said October 14th is when it's being revealed. And then as far as when it goes on sale, my guess is going to be next spring or something like that. It's I finally got the pronunciation right. I actually had to look up how to pronounce that because in the weekly update, whenever they first did the first teaser for the Taos, I butchered the pronunciation. Maybe I still am. I don't know, but I tried to research how to pronounce it right. A lot of people were like, what? You've never heard of Taos, New Mexico? And I'm like, no, I never have. But it sounds like it makes a lot of sense with, the Volkswagen naming scheme and stuff. So just going to take a little bit of getting used to for people that aren't used to that word, I guess. Sean's asking, which sounds better, Camaro SS or Charger SRT? To me, Charger SRT. I think those larger V8s sound a little bit better in my opinion. Rafi says, just want to say thank you for saying to save up for the Type R instead of buying an SI. I found Luckily, I found a used one at an incredible price. Thanks. Oh, that's awesome. Congrats on your new Type R. And that's good to, yeah, buy one used, save a little bit of money, and yeah, you end up, with a much better car. I mean, the SI's fun, but it's not nearly as fun as the Type R. So you definitely made a great choice there, and congrats. That's really exciting. Jersey Boy Greaser says, "Hey Matt, should I get the new Mini John Cooper Works GP or wait for the new Golf R?" I think the Mini is going to be definitely more rare and more of a raw car. So I haven't driven one, but from the reviews that I've read, it is like a really stiff ride. I mean, there's no back seat. It's very, very, I guess, hardcore. And so if that's what you're looking for, then definitely get at. I think, probably depreciate less than the Golf R. But the Golf R has a usable hatch. It has back seats. It's going to be a lot more comfortable, newer tech, all that kind of stuff. So it just really comes down to what your personal preference is. I'm assuming if you want a hot hatch, you want some practicality, and it really seems like the John Cooper Works isn't going to be very practical for the GP version, just being so intense. So it's a very cool little car, though. Yeah, but either one seems to be pretty cool. But also, Himansu's asking, "Hi, Matt. New Acura TLX 2021 Turbo 4 versus 2020 TLX V6." That really kind of comes down to your preference as well, because as far as the 4-cylinder goes, that turbo 4-cylinder does do more torque, I believe, than the V6, and you're going to have power come on way earlier with the turbo motors. I drove that motor in the RDX, and it's very punchy, feels bigger than a 2-liter actually, because of just how punchy it is. And so I think off the line, the turbo 4 is going to pull harder, the V6 is going to sound better. But also, I just like the newest technology and stuff. And the 2020 TLX, the interior is pretty old, and it just doesn't feel very modern. And so I think going and getting the new one is going to be the better choice. Speaking of the 2021 TLX, I am actually going to be having one over next weekend. So I'll be doing a review on one. It's going to be an advanced trim. The A spec is going to be loaned out, I think, to Sophie on Redline Reviews at the same time that I have the advance. But I'm excited for the advance because I usually do A spec versions of the Acuras, which are the sportier ones as far as the looks go. But the advance actually for the TLX is the one that has the adjustable side bolsters and the adjustable dampers, which are two things you don't get in the A spec version of the TLX for the new one. So I think that might actually, even though it's not going to look as cool and the thumbnail is not going to be as appealing probably as the A-spec version, I think that's going to be the one that I'm actually a little more curious about and seeing how those things kind of work out. So yeah, look for a review of that. Probably I'm going to try and post that one pretty quickly. So maybe look for that in a couple of weeks, soon after I drive it. But yeah, other questions here. Got a bunch of people joining. I appreciate everyone for coming on into the live stream here. We have Roger says, when do you think Lexus will redesign the RX 350 and the NX? So there was a leaked Toyota and Lexus timeline. I'm trying to think back because that was several months ago now, as far as when those ones were coming. I believe the RX was going to be a 2023 model year vehicle, so maybe coming in 2022. I think the NX is due to come first, which is why it's not really getting a refresh, even though the RX kind of got the new screen and stuff here for 2020, like I reviewed a few months back. So I think NX might be coming next year. I think that is what I remember. And then RX probably the year following. Yeah, so fairly soon. Broly's asking, will I ever upgrade your active exhaust on your Bullet? I will not, because I love the active exhaust. It's perfect the way it is. I love, love, love the sound. And if I want it to be louder, I flip a switch and it's in track mode, and then it's louder. If I want it quiet, I flip a switch and it's quiet. It's perfect to me. It doesn't need any more volume. And so for me, yeah, I definitely am not going to be changing the exhaust. So yeah, a couple other people talking about the TLX here. All right, we have Theodore's asking, do you think they will be canceling other Mustangs? I don't think so. I think it was just the GT350. And there's also, they said they always planned on having the GT350 end here at the 2020 model year, which could very well be true. But that motor had a lot of issues as well, that Voodoo motor. And, it might be that they're trying to, kind of prevent, more issues with the GT350, because it didn't seem like they fixed anything with the, 2020 refresh or anything, which was very mild. They just basically changed the suspension settings and stuff. But, there are a lot of blown motor GT350s. And so, yeah, I think that's maybe one of the reasons. That's just speculation, though. I have no clue. It could be they've always planned it. They don't care about the engines, and that's just the original plan. But I think as far as the other Mustangs, we know that the next generation Mustang is coming in, I think, about 2 years. 2022 is a 2023 model, so we still have 2 more model years here to fill. Mach 1's going to help, kind of keep that up for the next 2 years. GT500 is going to be there as well. And there's also rumors that the Mustang's also going to get the same front bumper the Mach 1 has, just for all, Mustangs for 2021. We'll have to see about that. But aside from that, it's just really kind of trying to keep it going for the next 2 years till the all new version comes. But I don't think there's any reason for them to cancel any of the other Mustangs. Orion says, since there's a recall on certain Mustangs, it's better to just wait for the 2021 lineup. I think the recall is just on the brake pedal on automatic Mustangs or something. I mean, recalls are a normal thing that happens with a lot of cars, especially something it's fairly minor like that. It's not a huge thing. It's not like defective engines or anything like that. So I think it's, not a big deal. You're going to get a better deal too on a 2020 that's been sitting around versus waiting. And you're going to be waiting a while too, because now I believe what I saw was that 2021 production is not starting until next spring. Everything got screwed up because of COVID and plant shutdowns and stuff. So I think they're going to build 2020 Mustangs until the end of 2020, which is highly unusual for the Mustang product cycle, but I think that's the deal. So if you want a 2021, you're going to be waiting until at least next spring, probably, which might be fine depending on where you live. It's starting to get cold around here, but if you live in a place you can actually drive it all winter and stuff, then I would definitely just go for a 2020. All right, we have Blue Raptor says, is there going to be a new version of the Nissan GTR? From all the rumors and stuff, it sounds like it's going to be a long time before we see a new GTR. So, yeah, I think that's one of those cars they're not in a hurry to replace, because, trying to do something that one-ups the current GTR while keeping the price reasonable is going to be nearly impossible. Everyone already complains about how expensive the GTR is. And granted, I know it's because that generation started much cheaper, but they did so many improvements over the years and stuff. And inflation just in the past 10 years also warrants that price increase a little bit. But, so I think it's going to be tough. I mean, I think they will eventually do one, but I think they're not even sure about what they want to do as far as the direction they want to head. They want to make it electric. They want to do hybrid. They want to just basically do the same thing they're doing with the Z and just take the same platform, give it brand new styling and call it a day. I don't know, but we'll have to see. I think it also is going to depend on how well the Z goes over. If that actually goes over well, people buy it. People don't mind that it's based on the 370. Then they might just do the same thing with the GTR and be like, all right, we'll just reskin it. It's an amazing car still, doesn't need any changes, and just go with that. That might be a totally fine way to do it and save a lot of money that way as well. Mike says, any info on the new Tundra? I don't think there is anything new. There's a lot of spy pictures and stuff, and then it seemed like, I don't know, maybe 6 months or a year ago, everything just went silent on the Tundra. So I have no clue. I mean, it's just the same rumors we've heard in the past as far as twin turbo V6 now for those and all that kind of stuff, but I have no clue what's going on with the Tundra. That's kind of been a big mystery. So I don't know, maybe I'm out of the loop on stuff, but I haven't seen any spy pictures or anything new since, last year on the Tundra. All right, I'm going to kind of skip down to the bottom here so that people aren't waiting too long for answers to their questions, and I'll try and skip around and get to as many as I can here. So Justin asks, hey, Matt, do you think the new 2020 Honda Civic will be a big difference? I think it should be a huge difference. From the patent images we saw in the weekly update this past week, it's going to be, a completely new car. It should be a new platform. Engines might be carryover possibly, but everything else should be a pretty big change. And so, yeah, I think it's going to be like any other new generation vehicle. It should be, pretty good redo. American GTS says Flat Rock is ending production of the Lincoln Continental around December. The plant is closing. Rumor has it the Mustang will be moved to Ohio. Really? I have not heard about Flat Rock closing. I thought that Flat Rock was going to build something else in the Continental's place, but I can't remember what. But sounds like you're more in the know on that than I am. So yeah, that would be crazy if that's the case. I don't know of what plant in Ohio they would even go to, but I'm not super familiar on all Ford's plans, but that'd be kind of a bummer though for Michigan if that ends up happening. Anyway, interesting. So Buster's Garage says Genesis GT70 rumors. Maybe you mean GV70? Because the GV70 is the SUV. I haven't heard of anything called a GT70, but I think with the GV70, I talked about that in the weekly update this past week as well. It's going to be awesome. It looks like it's going to be a beautiful SUV. Should be very impressive performance-wise as well. It's been lapping the Nürburgring a bunch and stuff, so they're actually trying to hone in the handling and get that to be really good. And so I think it's going to be a very promising SUV, especially if there's rumors it's only going to be like in the low 40s for its starting price, which would mean it would undercut like stuff like a BMW X3 and things like that, which would be great. So, typical Genesis, usually comes out swinging, and I'm excited for more on that. All right. American GTS says that's insider info about the plant. Interesting. Well, we'll see if it turns out to be true. Kyle, thank you so much for the first super chat of the live stream. He says, hey, Matt, do you think a $25,000 Tesla will be the electric car? What the electric car category needs to make consumers switch from gas vehicles? If not, what do you think needs to happen to make electric mainstream? So I think I don't know if a $25,000 Tesla is going to do it, just because that's several years away. And, with Tesla, they kind of were hoping that, the Model 3 was going to end up being that cheap, and then they end up having to raise the pricing and stuff. Unless there's a big battery advance, I think it's going to be a while before electric cars are ever competing with gas cars as far as an actual, price point that's on a level playing field. I think, it's a combination of multiple things. The batteries need to get better as far as they need to get cheaper so that they're rivaling the cost of a gasoline engine. And then they also need to be charging in 5 minutes or less to 100% to basically be the same as like a gas engine vehicle. I think without those two things, you're still going to have everyone who's like, well, what if I want to drive across the country tomorrow? No one actually does. And no one thinks about the fact they could just rent a car with gas if they ever needed to do that. But regardless, people, especially in America, they want their freedom. They want to just know that they can drive across the world at the drop of a hat if they want. And electric, you just can't do that. It's just inconvenient. And that's honestly my hang up. I'm fascinated by electric cars. And, I've considered, if it would make sense for me to ever get one. And with a lot of the around town driving and stuff that I do, it'd be fine. But me, I do usually travel a lot for all the different, vehicles that I review, especially whenever I was doing privately owned vehicles, I would be driving to neighboring states fairly often. Obviously this year I didn't because of COVID, but in a normal world, that's something I did a lot of. So it just didn't make sense even for me, even with the supercharger network and stuff, it's just more inconvenient. And whenever if you watch the Tesla Model S P100D review that I did, I actually drove that around North Carolina on a trip. I went down for a wedding, and it was like we did a little road trip in that vehicle, and it was just inconvenient because the battery just doesn't last as long as you're expecting it to, especially with the Teslas. It's like you can't go over 90% battery, but then you can't go below like 10% because that's bad for the battery too. So you only have 80% of the actual range that's quoted, and so that you start with less, and then it just takes a while to charge, and it's crammed with the charging stations if you're in a populated area and stuff. And so I think it's going to have to just be as easy as a gas vehicle, because people honestly just don't want to put in the extra work. And so until it gets to be as easy as a gas engine, I don't think it's ever going to take off, unfortunately. And then there's also people like myself who love V8 engines and like the sound, and you're never going to have that sound factor. But as far as commuters and stuff, I get that a lot of people don't need to have some crazy sound for a commuter. So that might, sway commuters once you actually have the fast charging times and stuff. But I think that's really the key that they need. It could be a $10,000 car, but if people have to sit around at a supercharger for 30 minutes, there's gonna be a lot of people that don't want to do that. But anyway, thank you again for the super chat. James, thank you so much for the super chat. He says, hope you're well, Matt. You often mention wanting a convertible if you had the room. What would be at the top of your list these days if you had the space? Well, I guess if money were no object, there's a bunch of dream convertibles I would love to have. But realistically, if I just did have the space, my top picks are Jaguar F-Type still. That's still the number one thing I would love to have. If I could stretch and I did have the money, I would love an LC500 convertible. I'd love when I reviewed that this past summer. And then otherwise, it just ND Miata. 2019 Miata. Fantastic car, best little convertible ever. Very affordable, very just fun. It's reliable. It's just an easy car to drive, but it's just pure joy. And so the answer is often Miata, and in this case, I think Miata is the answer if I couldn't get an F type. But even with the F types, they are coming down in price, but you also have to worry about reliability with the F type, which you don't have to worry about with the Mazda. So Miata is still a very tight runner up, but I think with the convertible, it would be nice for Beth to be able to drive it, and she can't drive stick. I could teach her how, but the Miata is a little bit of a tricky manual to drive because the flywheel is so light that the revs drop really fast. So being smooth with the Miata manual is a little tricky. And so, yeah, I think, probably it's going to be an F type whenever I do have the room someday, just because it's an automatic. It's a fantastic automatic. It's a beautiful looking car. It still sounds so good. And it's just a car I've always wanted still. So hopefully I'll just check that bucket list. And if it lets me down and it's horribly unreliable, then maybe I'll go to Miata or something. We'll have to see. But thank you again for the super chat. All right. So we have a Vishal says, would Beth be willing to get a Model 3 after her C300? Well, she's never ridden in one or driven one. She was impressed with the Model S. But I think she, really likes her Mercedes. She likes the luxury of it as well. And that's the thing that the Model 3 doesn't really have any luxury features. There isn't any kind of nice wood. There isn't really much ambient lighting. There's, the leather and stuff is just not as expensive feeling as it is in the Mercedes. You don't have cooled seats in the Tesla, which is something that, she likes having. There are some of those key luxury features. I personally, one of the things, my holdups with Tesla is there's no Apple CarPlay still, and I love using Waze and just for the alerts. And so I don't want to use built-in navigation ever. And so that's regardless of car brand. I just always want to use Waze because I want to know where cops are at, and I want to know when there's accidents, and I want to have smart rerouting and all that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, I think that's another thing. And that's one of the reasons why I'm really excited. I think the Lucid Air is going to have CarPlay, which is great. If all the other electric cars offer it, I hope that pressures Tesla into finally caving and allowing that. But yeah, that's one of the other big holdups. But I think Beth's firmly in the Mercedes camp. That's her brand, and I totally respect that because I blindly love the Bullet no matter what. And so that's my own little bias. So we all have our preferences. All right, so B Automotive says, do you think that SUVs and crossovers are ultimately going to make up the majority, if not the entire car market? I think that SUVs and crossovers are part of a fad. I think that there's always cycles and there's always just trends and things. And, this whole, everyone wants to be apocalypse ready and stuff with their SUVs and the extra practicality and stuff like that, I think is something that also gas is very cheap right now. And, if you look back at recent history, everyone was buying up their huge SUVs in the, early, mid, and kind of into the late 2000s. Then once gas got expensive, I remember pumping my $4 a gallon gas in Pennsylvania here and being like, man, this is tough. And that's all it takes. All it takes is gas prices going up $1. And I guarantee everyone's going to be trying to dump their SUVs for smaller vehicles or more fuel efficient SUVs, something like that, instead of these massive tanks that a lot of people have. And same thing goes for trucks. I think there's a lot of people that are like, oh, well, I kind of like a truck. Maybe it'd be nice to haul something once a year in it or something. And so they buy it, and gas is cheap, so who cares? And then gas goes up $1. All of a sudden, everyone's getting rid of them because, they want to have something that's more affordable. So I think that's the case. And I also saw an interesting study a while back. And I don't know if this is going to happen or not, but there was an interesting study that suggested that with SUVs, the largest buyer of especially the subcompact SUVs are older people, people who don't want to bend over to get into a car. And so it could potentially go into this cultural thing of like, oh, well, my grandparents drive SUVs because they can't bend over to get into a car, or they, just want something that's this essentially a little hatchback on stilts. And it's just accessible for them because it's got a nice high seating position and stuff. And so it could be potentially that SUVs someday become uncool. Now, obviously the Wranglers and the Broncos and stuff will always be cool. And for people who actually do off-roading, that kind of stuff makes sense. But for the average commuter, if gas goes up and your grandparents are all driving SUVs, you might be like, oh, I'll just go have the sleek sedan. And, we'll have to see. I know a lot of people do really enjoy the practicality of having a big hatch and stuff. So, that might be there to stay for a while. But I could envision it kind of shifting a little bit. And honestly, it's what's fashionable. Fashion doesn't make a lot of sense sometimes. Look at clothing fashions and, what is cool today and isn't cool tomorrow. Same thing goes for cars. And so that's why the car companies are just chasing the trends. Right now, everyone wants something massive. So Jeep's like, okay, well, let's revive the Wagoneer because it's massive and everyone loves that right now. And, in 10 years, if SUVs become unfashionable, maybe they'll say, hey, let's revive the Dodge Neon because now everyone wants something small and fuel efficient again. And, things go in cycles. So I don't think anything's really here to stay as far as, car trends and stuff. And that goes for gas, electric, all that kind of stuff too. We'll just have to wait and see, how that all progresses. All right. So other questions here. Fastline says you should start going back to the auto shows. Well, none of the auto shows aside from Beijing even happened this year, so I didn't really have a choice. But next year, we'll have to see. The auto show videos are just so much work. It's so much rushing around trying to post stuff as fast as possible. And, you got press conferences every half an hour. And so it's just exhausting and it's madness. And my channel's too small to compete with all the big channels that post stuff immediately and have their own editor and videographer that goes off and does everything for them. So honestly, trying to compete for auto show videos, it doesn't make sense for me. It's just a lost cause. So probably won't go to auto shows anymore, unless I just want to go to one for fun. But as far as trying to cover it and bring you breaking news at the auto show, that's probably not going to ever happen again. And then Sam's asking GLC 63 or X3M. I think that kind of comes down to whether you want V8 or, inline six as far as your sounds. And I have not driven an X3M. I've only driven the the M40i version of the X3, and that was fantastic. The GLC 63 I have driven, that's a lot of fun, but it's also a little bit on the stiff side. So I think maybe, I don't know if the X3M is any softer, but I know the M40i was softer. But they're both really, really fun. You can't go wrong with either one, honestly. And Brandon says, do you recommend twin turbo or supercharger for a G37? I don't know enough about the aftermarket with those to give you a good recommendation. But I would say generally superchargers seem to be a little less problematic than twin turbos are. So I'd probably do a supercharger personally. But I'd have to do more research. So excuse me, I would probably just go with whatever, the community, thinks is generally the best fit for whatever your goals are for the car, and, see what they have to say. Vishal's asking when I'm going to be getting the IS350 for a review. They're actually dropping that off next week as well. Next week's going to be a busy week. I have the IS350 for the first half and then the TLX over the weekend. And so, it's going to be interesting. And the embargo for the IS350, I believe, is October 15th for when all the reviews will come out. Mine will be coming out at the embargo date as well. So I think that's when you can expect to see all the IS350 stuff. It's going to be, I'm excited to see, if the suspension changes and stuff, make a big difference, over because since it's basically the same car underneath, it's not a new generation really for the IS350. I'll be curious to see, if the changes do really add up to making it feel different. Says, hey, Matt, I know you're a fan of the Nolan Batman films. Did you get the chance to see Tenet yet? I have not seen Tenet. I was planning on going to see it. And then, with movie theaters being weird and stuff, it seems like it's, safe now. So I'm not really opposed to going. But then I had a few friends that went and they said it wasn't great. I still want to see it. But now at this point, I'm like, well, do I want to see it badly enough that I actually need to go into the theaters to see it? I know, Nolan films and IMAX and stuff. So it's better to see it in a theater. But I might just wait till that one, comes on as a rental and then rent it. But I mean, it looked really promising. So I still might go see it eventually. I'm just honestly so busy still that I haven't really had a whole lot of free time. And Stanley also says opinion on Robert Pattinson playing Batman. The first trailer kind of got me excited, but it also kind of was a mixed bag for me with some stuff. So I don't know. We'll have to see how it plays out. I'm cautiously optimistic, but it's honestly right now, all I'm fixated on is No Time to Die, which I'm really bummed they just pushed that back to April, but I understand why. They need to make money on the movie. And so they need to, push it back until people are back to normal movie theater, attendance. numbers. But yeah, that's the number one movie that I'm excited for here in the next year or so. And then obviously Fast and Furious is going to be interesting to see Han coming back and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I don't know when Batman's supposed to come. I think it's a while to go anyway. But Robert says, hey, Matt, after driving the Charger wide body Scat Pack, would you own one if you had extra money to blow on another car? If I needed 4 doors, it would be a tempting option. It's just my holdup with the Charger, which a lot of people think is stupid. They just don't do well in crash tests. And especially now that I've been hit twice, once by a motorcycle and another by a falling tree, I maybe care about safety a little bit more than the average enthusiast does. But if you look at the crash test, the small overlap crash test for the Dodge Challenger, and it's the same platform as the Charger. They haven't crash tested the Charger recently, but the Challenger, it was not pretty. So that's really my only holdup is it's not a safe car, and I want to be in a safe car. So that's my holdup with it. But otherwise, it's a fantastic car, and I'm really optimistic. If they do a next generation version and it does do very well in its crash test, because hopefully it's on a new platform and it's safe and everything, I could very easily see myself buying one of the next generation down the road if I need 4 doors. I would very, very much consider it if it was actually safe or safe enough for my standards. It's not like it's an unsafe car. It has airbags and everything else, but it's just not up to my standards. I want a car that at least is an acceptable rating for the small overlap crash test for me to even consider it. But yeah, otherwise, I think they're really, really fun. Ronnie says, hey, Matt, just bought my first manual car. Congrats. Thank you for buying a manual transmission, F30 330i M Sport. Any advice for someone who's proficient, like past stalling, bucking shifts, but who just wants to treat their car as nice as possible? So I think, it honestly just comes, if you want to just prolong the life of the manual, I would just suggest not abusing it. Don't do any launches. Don't, take it to the drag strip. All that kind of stuff just puts extra wear and tear on it. You can obviously just go to the drag strip and not, clutch dump or whatever. You'll just have slower times. But I think that's really the only way you can kind of preserve it. Otherwise, I think it's just, I think you're just doing good. If you're not stalling, you're not, burning the clutch or anything, then I think you're going to be just fine. And yeah, so thanks again for buying a manual. Yuri from the Straight Pipes, thank you for joining, man. He says, thoughts on the TLX looks versus the Type S concept looks. Well, thanks for joining, man. Yeah, go check out the Straight Pipes if you guys don't, for whatever reason. They're amazing. They do really, really impressive reviews. Thanks for the super chat, man. You didn't have to do that, but I appreciate it. So as far as the TLX looks, I think personally, it looks pretty good. I think it's a better conversion from concept to production than most vehicles, that go through that cycle. But I think it definitely doesn't look as good as the concept, but it's close enough that it didn't upset me whenever I saw the regular TLX. But I'll have to go watch your guys' review. I have not had a chance to watch it yet. But yeah, I'm excited to drive it this week and see how it is. But thanks again for swinging by, man. I really appreciate that. All right, so we have Rick LP says, since you're a big Nissan fan, are they ever going to get rid of their CVT transmissions? I don't know what their plans are with their CVT, but what I do know is their newest CVT actually acts like a normal automatic transmission, and I have no complaints with it. Whether it'll be reliable in 5 years, I have no clue. But, I think car companies can improve. Look at Hyundai and Kia and stuff like that. Just because they had an unreliable transmission in the past doesn't mean they're just going to be unreliable until the end of time. So, I would definitely give it a shot if, you're looking at a Nissan. I don't know. I think they're, like I said, the Sentra drove really nice. The Altima drove really nice with their CVTs. I think it's much better feeling than Subaru's CVT, honestly. Theirs is really slushy and stuff. And so, yeah, I think, we'll have to see if they get rid of them. But I think CVTs seem to be here to stay just because they're better for fuel economy most of the time. And so, there are a few companies like Toyota and stuff that, kind of sticks to the automatics, but even they're going with, CVT for the Corolla and stuff. So I think CVTs are probably here to stay. Samuel says, hey Matt, what's your favorite sports car for under 40 grand? Thanks, been watching you for years. I appreciate that, man. I think the best sports car you can buy for under 40 grand, in my opinion, is the Miata. I mean, the Miata is just, especially the 2019 Miata specifically, you have all the power you're going to need. You have a nice high red line. You have a fantastic manual. It's a nice small car. It handles amazingly. I just think it's probably my favorite. Whenever, that's the first thing that just popped into my head. I mean, there's lots of other great choices. I think, if you consider the Mustang and the Camaro and stuff to be sports cars, then I think those are also a really good choice. I also think, you can just barely get a 370Z for that price. And as long as you don't, want to have the newest safety and the newest tech and stuff, the 370Z is also a really fun driving car that I think a lot of people overlook just because it's so old. But if you're looking for something naturally aspirated manual transmission with a V6, which is a rare combo these days, that's also a really good, choice. So, thanks for your question. Sean, thank you so much for the super chat. He says, any car YouTubers out there that you would like to collaborate with sometime? MCM, RCR. I mean, I'm always open to collab with, a lot of the YouTubers out there, as long as they're not, super clickbaity and stuff. I'm all about it usually. So, I mean, regular car reviews, I did collab with them back when I had the EcoBoost Mustang, and they drove that. And then I drove their vehicle, their Honda Fit, I think. I did a quick drive in. It's been a long time. That was probably 5 years ago at this point. But Mighty Car Mods would be awesome too. My one friend really loves Mighty Car Mods, so he would especially love me collabing with them. But any other car YouTubers? I mean, honestly, I love just, collabing with all the other actual reviewers that I've collabed with in the past. And, that's one of the things I miss about going on some of these press trips I went on was, I got to hang out with Yuri at the one launch for, I think, the Mazda CX-30. We hung out there, and it was great to hang out with them. Yeah, the Savage Geese guys, Mark and Jack, hanging out with them on the launch for one or two other vehicles, the Toyota Highlander, and then there was one other one that we did. But so I mean, there's so many good channels out there these days that, I'd love to collaborate with a bunch of them. I think a Savage Geese video would be really fun to collab with, though, just because, they did some parody videos on me back in the day, which I didn't love back when those originally came out. But since I've gotten to know them and stuff, they're really cool guys. And now, honestly, they're one of my favorite car review channels because I just love the dry sense of humor that Mark and Jack both have. And they just do such good videos. I like the technical stuff. They're so knowledgeable. I like their in-depth analysis of the stereos because that's something that is beyond me. I'm not able to evaluate stereos like they are. And so I learn a lot from their reviews. And so I'd be very cool to collab with them someday. And I did do, whenever we were on the Highlander press launch, Mark and I were drive partners. So we were able to kind of collab a little bit. I made a little cameo in his review and stuff, but I'd love to do more in the future for sure. All right. So Abdullah says, what car company makes the best looking stock wheels for their cars? I don't know. Maybe like Lamborghini or something. I'm trying to think of stock wheel. That's an interesting question. I think, the Mustang always does really well with their wheel designs, I think, for stock wheels. And, a lot of the luxury companies, I think like BMW makes some pretty nice wheels across the board. I think that there's a lot. Beth really likes her wheels. She just texted me. She loves her wheels on her Mercedes. And so, I think, there's a lot of luxury brands that do some really nice stuff with their wheels. But I can't think of anything off the top of my head that really stands out. Broly, thank you so much for the super chat. He says, what do you recommend upgrading base S556 speakers? So get subwoofer or change all the speakers or both? Thanks again for keeping us engaged. I appreciate you guys for watching. So I don't know much about upgrading speakers in the the Mustangs. I know Mustang 6G, there's a whole subforum dedicated to audio improvements. A lot of people do, and there's a lot of really knowledgeable like sound engineers in there that are really obsessed with improving it. And actually, this is something I might be able to do a little bit of a video on in the bullet, but there was a thread in that audio section where someone just optimized the stock stereo. And basically it involved turning off the surround sound function because that gets rid of the center speaker, which apparently ruins the sound in the vehicle. And then they just had like their preset settings for how they tweak the stereo to make it sound much better. And So I did those changes on the Bullet, and it does sound better. Again, I'm not a pro as far as analyzing what changes, how it sounds and stuff, but it just sounded a little bit better. It wasn't quite as muddy as it usually is with the bass and stuff, and it sounded a lot better. It basically just involved turning the subwoofer way, way down, because that, unless you're listening to, hard-hitting rap or something, like usually the subwoofer just ruins the sound of a lot of the music I listen to in the Bullet. So turning that way down really helped. And then, like I said, they kind of just tweak the treble and all that kind of stuff too. So you definitely want to check out that Mustang 6G subforum for more info on how to, tweak the speakers and swap out speakers. So a lot of people do swap them out. So should be lots of info on there. But thank you again for the super chat. The guy, and thank you so much for the super chat. He says, "Hey Matt, can you pronounce my name?" I'm terrible with pronunciations. I illustrated that just a couple weeks ago with the Volkswagen Taos. I think I called it Taos or something. I'm just awful with pronunciations. I'm really sorry. I mean, no disrespect. I am just horribly uncultured, I suppose. Beth says Gwen, so maybe that's how you pronounce it. That's so embarrassing though. I'm really sorry. Please, if you just want to put another little comment on how to pronounce it, I will someday learn how to pronounce more things. But I oftentimes with the weekly updates, even some of the cars, I have to look up how to pronounce a lot of the cars, because there's some different names and stuff, or just places and all that kind of stuff. So there's lots of times I got to figure out how to pronounce stuff. So I apologize. Thank you for the super chat. All right. And we have, he says, "No worries, just wanted to be funny." I appreciate that, man. But I should know how to pronounce stuff though, so that's on me. Melch says, "Hey Matt, how are you today? Just crossed 700 miles in the GTI. Congrats!" Yeah, he sent me a message, I think, on the Facebook page. He got a new GTI, and that's awesome. Keep on racking up those miles. That's what it's all about. Hopefully, you're still enjoying it, and hope you're doing well as well. All right. So A Wheel says, "Do you think there will be a Hyundai Tucson N?" I think they actually confirmed it. If they didn't confirm it, I think all the tabloids are basically confirming it. But I know that they're basically going to be doing it. I think I can't remember where I read something, but there was some pretty compelling evidence that they are going to be doing an N version. I think they're doing N versions of most of their vehicles, or it'll be an N-line version that is actually a good bit faster. So, but yeah, and we have Broly's suggesting a pronunciation here as well, and so does Ruffy. So I'm glad that everyone else could pronounce it better than I can. I'm just the horribly uncultured person. Fastline says, "Are you getting the new iPhone 12 when it comes out?" No, I'm not. I upgraded the iPhone 11 Pro last year because it was dark green. How could I not have upgraded to the iPhone 11 Pro? And so I'm keeping it. Usually I upgrade every 2 years. I also don't see anything super exciting about the iPhone 12 to upgrade to anyway, so I'll probably wait for the 13. I'm still holding out hope for a foldable iPhone. I think that'd be a really cool thing if they could actually perfect the folding iPhone. That would be really, really cool. I know Samsung and a few others are doing that kind of thing already, but I'm already in the Apple ecosystem, so I'm unfortunately stuck in the Apple ways, and I really like my iPhone too, though, so I'll just wait for them to come out with something like that. Jake says, "For 10 grand, would you buy a 986 Boxster or a non-01 C4 Corvette?" Between those two, I don't know. The C4 Corvette's fun if you want a retro experience. If you want to drive a car that feels like it's from the 80s and the 90s, early 90s, then the Corvette's going to be the better buy from a reliability standpoint, just because that first-gen Boxster, I mean, some people had okay luck with them, but I worked at a Porsche dealer back from 2006 to 2011, and all those old Boxsters coming in had a lot of issues. Any old German car just has a lot of issues. That's why I always recommend, if people are going to buy a German vehicle, just lease a new one. I think that's the easiest way to not have a headache on your hands. But a lot of people, do have pretty good luck with 911s and stuff like that. Unless your name's Nick Murray, then you have terrible luck with everything Porsche. But otherwise, I think as far as a driving standpoint goes, not worried about reliability and stuff like that, I definitely think the Boxster is a more fun car to drive than the C4 Corvette. So in a vacuum of everything is perfect and nothing ever breaks, I would probably go with the Boxster. Hopefully that helps with your question. Joshua Smith, thank you so much for the super chat. He says, buying an electric car, should I wait for the Mustang Mach-E or go with the Tesla Model 3? That's hard to say since I have not driven a Mach-E, so I can't really give you a good opinion, and really no one can unless it's a Ford employee. And they'd probably be biased as well. So yeah, I think between the two, I mean, obviously the Mach-E is an SUV too, so you have that extra component of practicality that you don't really get in the Model 3 as much. Obviously the Model Y, you could get that, but I'm assuming that's not something you're interested in if you're only looking at the 3. So between those two, I still think the Tesla is going to be the better electric car, simply because you have a much bigger charging network and it's faster. I don't know, I think the Mustang is going to be on the Electrify America network, if I remember correctly. And I know Ford's going to be investing in a bunch of charging stations and stuff like that too. But as of right now, there's not a million chargers around for a Mustang Mach-E, and there are for Teslas. So for simply ease of use, I would go with the Tesla. And also the Mach-E is a totally new thing for Ford, having a completely electric car, brand new platform, brand new technology with that huge screen. Everything in that car is brand new. And if you're, again, worried about reliability, I would 100% wait for a second model year for the Mach-E, because there's going to be so many teething issues. You look at if you look over in Europe, all the people that are having issues with the Volkswagen ID3, Taycan owners are having, some glitches and stuff. The Audi e-tron, those first adopters had a lot of glitches and stuff as well. The Model 3's had all that worked out now. So the Mach-E is going to be a real unknown, I think, and there's going to be some teething issues. So unless you're a diehard Mach-E fan, you love the idea and you're all about Ford and stuff, then maybe you're worth up for taking that risk. But I would definitely recommend the Model 3. And I think the Model 3 is a little bit of a better value, especially if you can get one used now. But I think just, again, charging and just the fact that it's perfected should probably sway you. But A-Wheel says, do you think Volkswagen is reliable? New Volkswagens, yeah. I mean, I think Volkswagen is also kind of hit or miss. It's just the electrical gremlins. All the German stuff just generally has more electrical gremlins than their import counterparts from, Korea, Japan. Even American stuff seems to have less electrical glitches. So I think that's kind of the only issue with Volkswagen. And so, yeah, I mean, my sister leased a Jetta for the first 3 years, loved it, had no issues with it whatsoever. So again, that's why I stick to, just the new German stuff. That's why Beth leases her C-Class, and she leased her other C-Class. I am a firm believer, and I put my money where my mouth is, just lease German cars. They usually lease very well anyway, so it makes more sense unless you're driving 30,000 miles a year. And so, yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on that. But all right, so other questions here. We have Tech Defender says, hey, Matt, I'm 20 and looking for my next daily for the next 5 years. I'm torn between Stinger and Civic Type R. Love the handling of the Type R, but also love the features of the Stinger. Being 20 and never owned a manual, should I just do it now before I have kids in a few years? Either one could be a good small family car too. So I think it just depends on how much you value those things. Now, I think with the brand new Type R, if that's what you're looking at, they are very comfortable. And I was amazed whenever I spent my week with the Type R, how when you have those dampers in comfort mode, it is super soft and comfortable. Maybe not quite as soft as a Stinger, but it's pretty close. So I don't think that should really be a factor. So it really comes down to, like you said, do you want the manual? Do you, just want the slightly sharper handling and stuff? The Stinger also weighs a lot more and you feel it in corners. So it just comes down to, I guess, what your preferences are. And I think you can have a manual and have kids and stuff as well. So I don't think, that should really be a worry. I think, you can have a manual at any age, and the Type R shows you can have a practical hatch and stuff and still have the stick. Now, whether or not manuals continue to go away and it's harder to find one in a few years, that's a whole nother thing. But I think it just comes down to, I guess, if you've actually driven both, I think that's definitely the key, is just test drive both to see what feels good to you. Personally, I would rather have a Stinger over the Type R because I like having better luxury. The Type R, the infotainment isn't great either. And so, those types of little things, the luxury of the Stinger, the adjustable side bolster, so the seats aren't as aggressive. That's one thing, the Type R, those seats, getting in and out of those seats every day is a little much. I mean, I'm 30, but it's not like I'm like out of shape or anything. So it just was kind of a pain with those seats. And I mean, so I think for me, I would go for a Stinger, but I would just suggest test driving both and see what you think. But good luck in your decision. You can't go wrong with either choice. They're both fantastic. All right. So Nathaniel says, what do you think of the 2015 Chrysler 200C? After 5 years of your review, I have a V6 and crossed 150,000 miles. My friend has 184,000 miles on his 2.4. I love this thing. That's awesome. And that's really cool that you managed to put that many miles on a 2015 too. That is really cool. I'm so jealous of people that get to drive so much because the Bullet has less than 15,000 miles on it still. I just very rarely have places to go outside of, driving the press cars all the time. I always have to put the miles on that. But as far as your question, I mean, it's been 5 years since I drove a 200C still. I haven't driven one since. But I think it was a car that was really nice and I think underappreciated. I don't know why they got a bad rap from a lot of people. It was comfortable. It was spacious. I thought it looked really good. I don't know why people just didn't buy them. I think in my area, there was a lot of them whenever they first came out and then it's just dropped off. And then Chrysler hurried up and killed it and stuff. I don't know why. I think it was really good. It had a ton of storage space inside. And now, I mean, they depreciated so much. You can get a killer deal on one. I think it's a really solid vehicle. And especially if you're doing, you and your friend are doing 150 to almost 200,000 miles on them, then sounds like they're pretty reliable as well. Or at least you guys just have really good luck. But yeah, so I think definitely a nice little commuter car, if someone's looking for something that's affordable. And Rafi says Stinger is definitely more luxurious. I agree with your statements on the Type R. Yeah, and there's just, the Stinger has a better stereo. It could go on and on with the Stinger. I think it's just a lot nicer. Fastline says, what should be my first car? That's kind of why I do these reviews, so you can kind of form your own opinions of what you like and what you don't like in a car. And it all comes down to personal preference. I don't think there's ever a perfect one car for everyone. That's why I don't like making blanket statements. I don't like doing scores or ratings or things like that, because just because I think that this is a 10 out of 10 doesn't mean you will. That's why I kind of put all the info out there. I'm like, this is how it feels. This is how it accelerates. This is how it is after a week. This is the gas mileage it gets. Here's the info. You do with it what you want. And if it sounds good to you, buy it. If it doesn't, buy something else. So I think that's kind of how I always try and frame the reviews, to try and make them as helpful as I can for you guys. And Samuel says, would you get a GT350 now since it's discontinued? I still just am paranoid about the motors blowing up because, like I said, so many of those GT350 motors are constantly, having issues. It's an amazing motor, but I like reliability. The 5 liter is reliable. And so, and also, I just love everything about the Bullet. So I never even considered a GT350, honestly. It was always Bullet. It was always going to be Bullet, and it always will be. I'm going to hopefully keep that car my entire life as long as I can, because I love it. But yeah, and Vishal says, I feel you, Matt. My 2016 Passat has only 22,000 miles right now. Doing school from home now, I really don't get to go out much. Yeah, that was everyone this year, and it's kind of a bummer, it's just, it's tough. But it's just an oxymoron too, that my job is driving and reviewing cars, and then I can't even drive my own car because I'm always driving other cars. It's a good problem to have. I'm not complaining at all, but there's so many times where I'm actually excited when I don't have a press car for weeks. I'm like, yes, I can finally daily drive the Bullet. And like, there's 2 times this week where so this week I have a Chevy Tahoe, which is massive. And so there's been a couple of times this week where I needed to run errands, but it was in a place that had a small parking lot, and I didn't want to deal with the enormousness of the Tahoe. And so I'm like, all right, sweet. I can just take the Bullet out and do my little errands in that, because it's, nice and small and stuff. And it was just great. It's like, I think that does help me to enjoy the Bullet even more, though, because then whenever I do get to drive it, even if it's only once every 2 weeks or something, it's like, oh man, this is the greatest thing ever. And it never gets boring for me. Not that I don't think it ever would, but it just makes it even more special when I get to take that car out. So I guess it's kind of a give and take. But Kagan says 2017 Mazda Miata Club or Alfa Romeo 4C. This is another case of, do you care about reliability or not? Because if you do, Miata. If you don't, alpha. It's that simple. And I know, so I think Jason of Engineering Explained, I think he actually has a friend that has a 4C or had a 4C. And I think his did have issues, but he really loved it. And I think the 4C is going to appreciate in value because there were so few of them that were sold. I think that's a future classic that's going to go for big money someday. I don't know how far off you plan on keeping whichever car you buy, but I think the 4C eventually is going to start appreciating, and it is a very amazing car. I mean, I did do a quick drive video on the Spider, and it is fun. It is definitely more extreme than a Miata. It is, you sit lower, it's a carbon fiber tub, it's way more exotic feeling than the Miata. The paddle shifters and stuff, you know, it's obviously not as fun as the stick in the Miata, in my opinion. But the 4C is just so exotic. Obviously, it's mid-engine, so that makes it a lot more exotic feeling. So if you have the heart and you can go beyond the reliability stuff and you're willing to take a chance, the 4C is, I think, a very underrated car that's worth considering because it's just so, so cool. So yeah, if you care about reliability, Miata. If not, 4C. Jason, thank you so much for the super chat. He says, hey, Matt, do you think Ford is going to hold on to total sales this year? It looks like they're down. Do you think Ranger sales are affecting it? I'm guessing you mean F-150 possibly. I haven't looked at Ford's sales recently. I think obviously this year is going to be an outlier for everybody as far as just nothing is normal. And so trying to, you know, prop up car sales. It sounds like it worked for this past quarter because it seems like car sales did rebound. But that was partially because everything was 0% financing. It was like, well, if you lose your job, we'll make payments for the next 6 months, and you know, all these reassurances and huge discounts to get people to buy. And everyone had a stimulus check, and so that was like extra down payment money for a lot of people. And you know, we'll have to see if another check comes, but it doesn't seem like it's likely and stuff. So I think this past quarter being a rebound is a flash in the pan, and it will drop off again. So I don't know if Ranger sales are affecting it though. I don't see the business case for the Ranger still very much. It just seems like it's too expensive. It's too big. I think they're going to hit a home run with the little Maverick that they're developing right now. That's going to be based on the Bronco Sport. That thing, yes, it's going to be a unibody, you know, so there'll be some people that still want the body on frame thing. But for people who don't care, and people who just want the lifestyle truck, I think that thing is going to sell like crazy, especially if it's cheaper than the Ranger by a good bit. That could be the biggest hit for Ford. I don't know, since the F-150 probably, if they actually play that right. I think that could be huge. But thank you so much again for the super chat. Smile Per Mile says, Matt, as a former BRZ owner, what do you think Subaru and Toyota should do to make the next gen BRZ 86 a success? Perhaps smoother torque and power curve like the ND and reducing weight. Yeah, I think those are probably the best two ways to go about it. And I do hope that that's kind of the path they're going down. You know, there's rumors that it didn't lose a lot of weight, but the rumor is about 20 pounds less. And then, you know, the 2.4 liter engine should have more torque, more power. Probably not as much as everyone's hoping for. You know, everyone wants a 300 horsepower BRZ, but I think, you know, for what it will be, so that it doesn't step on the toes of the 4-cylinder Supra, I think, you know, it's going to be, I think they're doing the right thing of, yeah, just, you know, more power and torque, just a little bit. I think honestly what the BRZ needed was torque. It didn't even need horsepower. It was fine horsepower wise, but the torque, 151 pound-feet, just felt slow unless you had that thing, you know, full throttle in a low gear. Otherwise, you know, it did feel sluggish. And so I think that's one thing that the Miata kind of fixed is, you know, you do have a solid amount of torque in the Miata. And so I think that combined with this lower weight really helps. But then whenever you look at other vehicles, you know, all these little turbocharged 4-cylinder things that have 200 horsepower, like the Kia Forte GT, stuff like that, way faster feeling because you have 195 pound-feet of torque. And so I think the torque is the really big thing they need with those to make them really good. Tier Blood, thank you so much for the super chat. He says, BMW 3 Series versus Audi A4 versus C-Class, which would you get and why? So I actually was having a discussion with one of Beth's friends the other day about this. They were also considering an A4. They were checking out her C-Class, and then you know, the 3 Series also is another competitor there. Between those three, so I guess it also kind of depends on which version of those you're going for. Since you said A4, not S4, I'm guessing you're talking about base engines. And so as far as base engines go, I honestly think the C-Class is what I would pick as well. And I think that's, why Beth picked it. I mean, again, she loves Mercedes, so there's that whole thing. But I think the things that I like about the C-Class, I have not driven the brand new 3 Series, so I really can't even weigh in on the 3 Series, but I have driven the new A4. And the C-Class just has faster steering, so it's really quick and agile and feels very eager. It also feels a little bit sharper than the A4, and the interior is more luxurious, in my opinion, than the A4. So between those two, I would go C-Class. Now, the 3 Series, again, I have no clue. I've heard good things about it. Obviously, it's typically the benchmark, so I would just have to drive one to see. But I think it would either be C-Class or 3 Series between those two, and then if you're going for the faster versions, I think the M340i seems to have a little bit of an edge over the C43 from what I've read, but again, I've not driven the 3 Series at all. And I'm going to try and work at BMW and getting press cars from them, because I do really want to review a lot of the newer BMWs, especially the 3 Series, but the Z4, a bunch of them that I would love to review. So I think I'm going to try and get some BMW press cars here and see if I can make some progress there, because I know a lot of people do ask about them a lot, and they sell a ton of cars, so it's not a brand I should I need to cover BMWs more than I am currently. Dwayne says, I'm passing down my 2010 4Runner to my son. Do you think the LX 570 is worth buying over the Land Cruiser? I've not driven a Land Cruiser, so I cannot weigh in on that either, but honestly, I think, the pricing is so similar. You might as well have the more luxurious interior of the LX, I think. And I think that's probably a pretty safe bet that it'd be better than the Land Cruiser. But I could be wrong. I've never driven, like I said, a Land Cruiser, but I think I would go for the LX 570 probably. Chris says, I enjoy your weekly updates. Go Honda. I appreciate you watching them, and I appreciate everyone that continues to watch the videos. I know you have a lot of choices these days. There's so many good channels that do car reviews and car videos and car news now as well. There's some new competitors there, and so there's lots of good choices out there, and so I appreciate all you guys that continue to watch. Afterlife says Mach 1 versus Camaro SS 1LE. We'll have to see. Obviously, no one's driven the Mach 1 yet. As far as the specs and stuff go, I mean, it sounds like they're going to be very evenly matched. It's just going to come down to, it's also a very different character, because the Camaro V8 is all torque, it's all low end, and the Mustang Mach 1, that 5-liter, just loves to sing. It's got the 7,500 RPM red line now, since it has the bullet engine and stuff in the Mach 1. That motor loves the rev. Not as much down-low, power, although the Mach 1 will have the Tremec. We'll see how they do the gearing in it. If it's going to be any punchier than it is with the 6-speed and the bullet and stuff. But really just going to come down to, do you like revving out a V8, or do you want to have all your power from the second that you step on the gas? That's really where it's going to land as far as which one's better in your opinion. A Wheel says, what do you think are the best reliable hot hatches under or around 10 grand? All-wheel drive would be good in the snow. Well, all-wheel drive hot hatch, what else do you have other than just a WRX? I'm trying to rack my brain here, because I guess you can get an R32 maybe if it's old enough for that amount of money. I don't think there's really anything else. Maybe I'm missing something. Focus RS is going to be too expensive. What else? I don't think there's anything else under 10 grand other than WRX and the R32. So between those two, I would say WRX is more fun to drive, but it's definitely probably the least reliable. But the Volkswagen R32 is probably not great either. The Volkswagen, you have electrical issues possibly, and the Subaru, especially if you don't keep it stock, you'll have engine issues and possibly transmission issues depending on what year. But neither of them are fantastic choices. But honestly, I love the WRX. I still do love that, the old generation WRXs with those engines take off and stuff. So I'd probably pick the WRX. Sounds better in my opinion too. But yeah, it's not a lot of choices there. But all right, other questions here. Nabil says, you should talk more about reliability that would be unique compared to other car channels. It's one reason I am considering a Mustang GT rather than a GT350. Yeah, that is something I would like to talk about more. The problem with talking about reliability is I can't be an authority on it. It's really hard to be an authority on reliability. I know like Consumer Reports, does a good job on, actually serving people, but even that can be potentially flawed. And so it's just very tough to predict. You kind of have to just take the consensus of the forums. That's really the way to do it. And I could go and Google, the forums for a certain car and try and get a consensus, but I still feel like even that is so hard. Because, like, for example, a lot of people have a wrong idea about Alfa Romeo. Just because Car and Driver had an unreliable quadrifolio, and a few other people have had issues with, Alfa press cars, and some people did have some issues in the first year. If you go on the Giulia forums, like, there is a mile-long list of people that are like, it's totally fine, it's totally reliable. And, another good way to do reliability stuff is to look at the old, like, Carfaxes for any car you're looking at. So, for example, if you're worried about Giulia reliability, go look at all the used Giulias with high miles on, Auto Trader or whatever. Pull up their Carfaxes. If it's like a million issues, it's always in for service, it's going to the dealer every 1,000 miles or something, then it's like, all right, well, if you're seeing that a lot, then maybe it's unreliable. But then, the second that I would say, for example, the GT350 is unreliable, then there'll be someone that'll come on and bash me and say, well, my GT350 has 100,000 miles. I sit at 8,000 RPMs 24/7 and it's totally fine. You're crazy. So reliability is very much a luck of the draw thing with any brand. I think warranties really help to give people reassurance about that. And that's why I do focus on the warranty aspect whenever it's a selling point, like with the Kias and the Hyundais, because I do say, hey, Kias and Hyundais have a 10-year warranty. They're probably a little more reliable because they wouldn't warranty a car that was falling apart after a few years, because they would just lose tons of money in reliability claims or warranty claims. So I say stuff like that, but then I still get comments from people being like, oh, my Kia blew up in the first 2 months and they're terrible, they're junk and stuff. So, like, you still get some of that, even whenever all I do is say the warranty is good. So, that's why it's very hard to be an authority. And with the reviews, I want to give reliable information. I never want to have bias or have any kind of, give people the wrong idea about a car. And so I don't know how good the Giulia actually will be. And, there's some people, I've talked to a few owners of them, for example, that say, yeah, totally fine, totally good. And then, I hear from other journalists that say, yeah, well, mine had a check engine light whenever I was driving it around or something. So, it's just really hard to weigh in on reliability. Consumer Reports, I think, is the closest you're going to get to a true reliability rating. But even that's kind of skewed because they also have, everyone that subscribes to Consumer Reports cares about reliability. So generally, they're all buying reliable cars anyway. Very few people that read Consumer Reports and are worried about reliability, like, oh, I'm going to go buy the Alpha because I'm hearing that they're super unreliable. I want to try it out. Like, they all just buy Toyotas anyway. So it's kind of this self-fulfilling prophecy with Consumer Reports a little bit. But, so it's just really tough to pinpoint. But anyway, very long-winded answer to your question, but hopefully that explains why I don't talk about it more. But Garrett, thank you so much for the super chat. He says, hi, Matt, I'm in my 20s and torn between a used Stelvio or a Type R. Should I take use my next daily driver to learn a stick and become more of a car enthusiast, or listen to my parents and get the practical SUV? Well, I don't know. I mean, I guess maybe if you're like moving into college and things like that, but I don't know why you need a practical SUV if you're in your 20s, unless you have kids or you have huge dogs or something like that. I mean, I think generally, before you have the kids and before you need the practicality is when a lot of people, have the fun car. And it's not like a Type R is impractical. I mean, you have a really big hatch, you have a very nice sized back seat and all that kind of stuff. So personally, if you do want to learn stick and you do want to have something a little fun and crazier, I think the Type R is a fantastic first car to learn stick on. It's a fantastic first enthusiast vehicle because it's front wheel drive. It's very accessible. It's very safe and predictable in the way that it handles and all that kind of stuff. But it still is an absolute ride. It's still a ton of fun. The Stelvio, again, reliability kind of comes into play there a little bit. A lot of Stelvios are reliable, but some, can have a little bit of an issue. So, the Stelvio is a fun SUV, though. It really is. And so if you do want an SUV for whatever reason and whatever your lifestyle is, if you haul bikes or something, I'm not sure if that would, be an easier fit in a Stelvio than a Type R. But I really think the Type R is so practical. There is no case for an SUV over a Type R if you're open to the Type R. I think it's going to be just as practical as most SUVs. So my vote would be the Type R. Sorry to your parents, but I think, yeah, save the SUVs for whenever you have kids and, animals or, just need more space in your life. But as of right now, if you could live with a Type R, I would totally do it. It's a lot of fun. All right. So Joe says, when you reviewed the 718 Cayman GT4, do you think you would be happy with a cheaper GTS 4.0 variant if you were to spend most of the time with it on public roads? 100%. Definitely, for sure. And I'll hopefully be able to confirm that hunch of mine because my friend actually has a GTS 4.0 on order. I don't think it's going to be arriving until towards the end of this year, so it might get too cold to review it this year. But he's offered it to me already, and so hopefully at least by next spring I'll be able to review that and answer you definitively on that question. But I mean, it sounds like it's got a softer suspension and a little more sound deadening, I think. So that alone, I would go for a GTS, and it's just cheaper. And, obviously the Cayman GT4 might hold its value a little bit better if you care about that. But, if it's a car you're going to buy and just enjoy and drive, I think that the GTS 4.0 is going to be definitely the way to go. But they're both a lot of fun for sure. Tierblood says, what's your thoughts on the Genesis? I love all the Genesis models. I think they're all great. I'm excited to hopefully drive the G80, the new G80 and the GV80 here this fall. I also am going to be getting the new G90 finally. I know that's not really super fresh, but I'm going to be having one of those here, I believe, towards the end of this month as well, and I'll be having a review on that coming. But yeah, I think Genesis is a really exciting brand to watch, and they're really coming out swinging, and it's exciting to see. Wretched Drake says, hey, Matt, as someone who's considering a 2015 plus Mustang, given your experience, would snow tires be mandatory for winters? My friend's 2012 Camaro is completely useless in the winter with all seasons. I guess it kind of depends on where you live as well, but I'm assuming you're living in a place with a lot of snow and stuff. And if that's the case, yes, snow tires 100%. All season tires, they don't really do a very good job at anything. I mean, there are some all seasons that are really good. I think the Michelin Pilot all season is pretty good, it sounds like. And I've actually considered swapping to that tire on the Bullet, but it's going to be a long time before these tires on the Bullet are low enough to need replacing. So we'll have to see, because it would be nice to have the flexibility of, not having to swap tires, and I can just, when it's a day that's going to be into the 30s or, something, there's potential for precipitation, I don't have to worry about hurrying up and, not driving the Bullet or putting snow tires on it or something. But in my experience with my other Mustangs that I drove, I put snow tires on all of them in the winter here in Pittsburgh, and it was 100% necessary because the all seasons just don't cut it. You have the snow mode and stuff like that, but unless you're driving on dustings of snow, anything more than that, you're going to want snow tires for sure. So I would definitely suggest that. Even if you're not getting a V8 Mustang, even with the 4-cylinder EcoBoost, I had snow tires on that. And even that, it helped, but, it's definitely a little bit of a challenge if you're starting on a hill and stuff with any rear-wheel drive car in the snow. But I would definitely recommend the snow tires. Let me get a drink here real quick. Got another probably 50 minutes or so here. I'm glad to see everyone still hanging out. Michael says Bronco or Land Cruiser. Haven't driven either of them. They're very different vehicles. Obviously the Bronco is going to be more like the Wrangler as far as off-road capability versus the Land Cruiser being a lot bigger. I don't know. I'm really excited about the new Bronco. I'd probably pick that as long as you don't care about reliability. Because again, first year model might be a little iffy for the Bronco. Land Cruiser is obviously going to run until the end of time. So if that's a factor for you, then the Land Cruiser might win out in that regard. All right. So Garrett says, thanks for the advice, Matt. Sorry for the typos. Had to edit to keep character count down. Oh, no worries, man. I didn't realize there was a character limit there. So apologies for that. But yeah, I appreciate the super chat again. And Bob's asking, can't you just put snow chains on a Mustang or something? At least in Pittsburgh here, you're not allowed to have snow chains because it just rips up the roads and stuff. I think only in mountainous areas are you allowed to actually have snow chains. I could be wrong. It, I guess, depends on the area you live in. But here in Pittsburgh, you're not allowed to have snow chains. You're not even allowed to have studded snow tires. It has to be studless. So it kind of limits your abilities. So that's why a lot of people around here drive Subarus and stuff like that instead and just have the all-wheel drive, although a lot of them still run on all seasons. So anyway, that's a whole nother rant. But anyway, Robert says Jeep Gladiator or Tacoma. That's another question of reliability. I mean, the V6 and the Gladiator seems to be pretty reliable, but Tacoma's, again, another vehicle that's going to run till the end of time. So if you care about that, that's a good pick. But otherwise, it just comes down to, do you want the off-road capability? Because the Gladiator is so much more expensive. I mean, it's not even really comparable to a Tacoma as far as pricing goes. I mean, even a bare bones Gladiator is going to be about the same price as like a fairly nicely equipped Tacoma, honestly. So if you're going to do a lot of off-roading, like serious off-roading that you need a Jeep for, Gladiator is amazing. I took it down like a mini waterfall on the press trip in the Gladiator. I mean, they are truly remarkable if you're going to use it. If you're going to use it as just a normal truck to commute around in, 100%, I think the Tacoma is a lot better driving and stuff. So I'd probably pick that. William says, do you think you would enjoy working inside the auto industry as an enthusiast, or do you think you'd be frustrated since the bean counters seem to be running the show nowadays? I've considered that, because there's actually a lot of journalists, more so like normal print journalists, that switch over and do work in the auto industry as like a PR person and things like that. And it's something I've considered, would I ever want to do that? And I think my holdup is, you really have, especially as a PR person. Now, if it wasn't PR, maybe it'd be better, but as a PR person, you really have to drink the Kool-Aid a lot. And I mean, I know a lot of really down-to-earth PR guys and girls that are very level-headed and, are very open-minded and acknowledge that maybe they're not the best in, one caveat or one way or the other. But I think I would just, me being an objective reviewer all the time, obviously you have to find the strengths of your particular product whenever you're doing PR and stuff like that. But I just feel like it'd be really hard, if I was like doing PR for, one of the brands that wasn't a brand that I was in love with the most. Like, I love Genesis. I'm truly excited about like Genesis and what they're doing. So maybe if it was a brand I was passionate about, I could be like, yeah, this is the greatest thing ever. It's cheaper than all the others, has a longer warranty. The looks are gorgeous. It's probably more reliable than all the other Germans and stuff. Like a brand that I could truly get behind, I could probably work on the inside for, but it would have to be a brand that I personally think is truly the best brand out there. And so that would very much limit my employment opportunities, I think. But yeah, I mean, and then there's other stuff. Like, I originally wanted to be an automotive engineer. That's what I wanted to do, is, do mechanical engineering. So I went to Virginia Tech. I'm wearing my Hokie shirt today. But then I was not smart enough to be an engineer. And so I landed in finance. But, I think if I could do engineering, it would be something I would love. I would have loved to do that. But just wasn't in the cards for me. Noel, thank you so much for the super chat. He says, Bronco Sport excites me. It's like a Forester without a CVT. So soft off-roading will be realistic. For daily driving, it is the perfect because I have them out already. Yeah, it sounds like a great choice. I think the Bronco Sport's going to be a cool little vehicle. And I'm also excited about the fact they're actually putting the 250 horsepower engine in it. And aside from the Mazda CX-30 with the new turbo motor it's going to be the fastest thing in that subcompact class. And I know the Forester is a little bit bigger, but yeah, I think, I don't know. I mean, a lot of people love their Subarus and they don't care about the CVT, but personally, yeah, the CVT is just a complete deal breaker for me. Subaru could come out with the greatest thing ever, but if it only came with a CVT, I don't care if it's 1,000 horsepower for $5. Like, if it had a CVT, it just like, their CVT, I wish they would tune it to actually feel like a real automatic. That was one of the things with the Crosstrek that I just reviewed too, is it's a really good little car. It's just that CVT kind of, you just have to, like, I guess, look over that. And some people do, but for me, it's tough. But yeah, Bronco Sport's going to be fantastic. I hope that I get to review one here sometime next year, because I'm pretty curious about it. Garrett says, just one more follow-up question. What is it like to daily drive a manual? Traffic isn't too bad where I live, but I do a lot of driving between San Antonio and Houston, which is about 200-ish miles. Daily driving a manual, I think, is fun. It's more involving. It forces you to actually pay a little more attention than an automatic. And I think it's totally fine. I mean, in traffic, that really comes down to what manual you get, because if you have a really heavy clutch, which is really rare these days, but even 10 years ago, there was a lot of stuff with a heavy clutch. That's a bummer because then it's like you're actually getting a leg workout inching up in traffic. And it's not fun in like the Bullet either, even though that clutch is fairly light. But it's not too bad. It's been a while since I did do a commute in traffic with a manual, but I did used to do it for several years. And, I think it just gives you a little more wear and tear on the manual because you are engaging that clutch more and more. And I mean, you can be very, very gentle with it, but the fact that you just are doing the act of engaging it instead of just letting it be in gear and doing its own thing on the highway for a million miles or whatever, it is going to be a little more stress on it. But unless it's really a grueling commute and you're really inching up for, 5 or 10 minutes or more, just on and on and on, I think it's fine. Because honestly, a lot of stop and go traffic, you are stopped. And then in that case, you put it in neutral and you're fine. So it really comes down to if you're doing the crawling type of commuting, that can be annoying. But if you're not crawling for long periods of time, I still think a manual is fine and, worth the stress of, doing it every once in a while. But yeah, all right. Joel, thank you so much or Joel. I don't know why I said Joel. Sorry. Joel, thank you so much for the super chat. He says, how are you doing today? I'm doing well, aside from mispronouncing everyone's names. He says PS5 or Xbox. Thank you again for the other super chat. I personally have an Xbox One. I haven't followed the whole console wars thing of everything coming out here soon, but I don't really have a lot of time to play video games either, but I personally like Xbox because I like Forza a little bit better than Gran Turismo these days. And, I'm also excited for Test Drive Unlimited, which is, I think, going to be Xbox exclusive. So as far as racing games go, I just think Xbox has a little bit more of an advantage. I could be completely off with that statement, but that's just my impression. And so I'm probably not going to buy either of them though. But yeah, I think I personally prefer Xbox a little bit. Oh, and Noel says that's how he pronounces his name. See, I mispronounce everyone's names. This is terrible. Thank you for correcting me. I'll definitely try to remember that, Noel. But yeah. Anyway, Dustin says, what's up, Matt? I appreciate you joining, Dustin. We have Broly's also asking, drive a manual, just be patient. Don't keep crawling too much. I give a car length before I move. Be patient and fun to drive in traffic. Yeah, that's really good advice, actually. Thanks for saying that. Yeah, you don't have to be always right on the other person's bumper when you're inching up. And that's what I did when I was commuting a lot too, is you let them go a little bit, give them a little bit of space. Because some people just do inch up a few actual inches and then they stop again. So there's no point in trying to be constantly right there behind them. So give them a little bit of space. And then, that way you have to inch up a little bit less. That's great advice. All right. Tear Blood, thank you so much for the super chat. He says, hey, Matt, I'm looking to get my first luxury car next year. So I was wondering what brands you recommend. As of now, Genesis has my attention. I would wholeheartedly support the Genesis as, being the top contender, most likely. So it comes down to how much backseat space you want, because the Genesis does have a good bit less. If you're open to the Kia brand, the Stinger GT is also worth a look. It's just as luxurious as the Genesis, in my opinion. Has the extra practicality of a bigger backseat, larger hatch. So you have all that going for it. So those are probably my top two picks. I'm also very interested in like the TLX, which again, I'll be having as a press car here, the new one next weekend. I'm excited to drive that. I think that has a lot of potential. If you want reliability, the new Lexus IS could potentially be a good choice, as long as you don't mind the fact that it's still a little bit older with its setup. And, other than that, I think Cadillac is also an underrated brand. And I know it's kind of a mixed bag with everyone's opinion on Cadillac, but I think outside of Genesis, they're the next best value proposition because you get huge discounts on anything that's GM because they give them grossly inflated MSRPs and then be like, look, you're getting 15% off. And it's like, actually, this is just what it should have always been priced at. But outside of the goofy pricing, I think that Cadillac makes fantastic sports sedans now, and they have for a while. But I love the CT4. I'll have a review of that coming this month. The CT4V, the CT5V, I just posted that review. That's another fantastic choice. And I actually compared it a lot to the G70. If you need a bigger back seat, the CT5 is a really good choice. Still has such good handling, great tech. I think it looks good. Has all the luxury features you want. I think a CT5 is, very much worth considering. And that motor has also been proven in the CT6 with that twin turbo V6 already. So I think it's, hopefully had the teething worked out of it and stuff. So I think, and also next year, if you're also buying new, next year, the CT5 you can get with Super Cruise, which then gives you the best adaptive cruise control system on the market, better than autopilot, better than everything, in a car that's going to handle fantastically. It's going to be an all around win, I think, for the Cadillac. So that's another strong contender. If the Genesis doesn't end up working out for you, I think that the CT5 is definitely a good choice. So other questions here. We have someone says, Bo says in caps. So I was able to actually see the comment. He says, "Do you ever regret selling the BRZ and not boosting it?" Caps for attention. I don't regret not boosting it. So I do regret selling the BRZ fairly frequently, just because at the time it seemed like getting the Mini would have been the better choice. Obviously, hindsight is 2020, and if I would have known that the Mini was going to be super unreliable, I would have never bought it. I kind of fell in love with the idea of having the Mini, and I loved it. It was so much fun. It's just not reliable. Again, used German vehicle, always an interesting case. I think if I could go back and do everything over again at that point in time, I would have kept the BRZ. I would have just refinanced it because I did have some equity in it. And honestly, if I would have refinanced the BRZ, because the reason why I sold it was because I was in a position in life where I couldn't afford it at that point in time. And so if I would have refinanced it, I could have continued to afford it. And, the exhaust also got a little bit on my nerves and stuff, after about 2 years of owning it. So I would have sold the exhaust to kind of, get a little bit of money there, bundle that into the refinancing, and then, maybe someday done a more mild exhaust on it, and then just continue to drive it. Because that car was so good to me. I loved it. I still do miss it a good bit. And and supposedly someone commented on one of the videos not too long ago and said that they actually bought it. They were the owner of it. And they drove it for like 150,000 miles and they traded it in. And so I wish they would have reached out to me back when they had it, because I would have loved to have kind of done a reunion video with it or something like that, just to see what it looks like at 150,000 miles. And I've been trying to see if I can get a partnership with Carfax or something, because I want to run Carfaxes on all my old cars again. But to do that would cost because at this point I've owned, what did I own? I don't know, 5 or 6 cars, 7 cars at this point. To run Carfaxes on all of them would cost me like hundreds of dollars, and the video would never make enough ad revenue to even cover that cost. So I'm hoping to someday do a Carfax video on all my old cars again and kind of do that research, see how the BRZ is holding up. Did it have a bunch of services? Was it unreliable? Once it got over 100,000 miles, I don't know. So I'd love to kind of dive back into all that. But anyway, kind of a little bit of a tangent. But Noel says, you caught so much crap for that. People on the internet are psychos. We've all made financial mistakes as young people. Yeah, totally agree with that. That's like I said, I would just go back and I would have kept the BRZ. Honestly, if I could have controlled things again with the knowledge of the future, knowing there was going to be a Bullet and all that kind of stuff, I would have probably just kept the BRZ and then maybe traded it in for the Bullet or kept it, because at that point it would have been paid off, had it as a fun little weekend car, and then just have the Bullet as, the commuter kind of thing or something. But that's how I would have probably done it. But what can you do? All right. So other questions here. We have Joji Jim. I hope I didn't butcher that. I'm sorry if I did. He said, do you think Abarth could have sold more 124 Spiders if they fitted it with the Alpha 4C's 1.75 engine? Definitely. But then it might have been even less reliable than, it was with the little turbo engine in it. I don't know. I think I've been hoping that 124 Spiders start to get cheap, because that would be a really fun project car. Not that I'm really looking to do a project car, because I don't have any time to do one or the space. But that would be a fun thing, to take a 124 Spider and, put a more fun engine in it, something a little bit crazier. It would be a really cool project, I think. But I think they would have sold more. I don't know. I don't know why they didn't sell more 124s, aside from the fact that just, so many people still just love the Miata. Fiat had the reliability thing. And so there might be some of that held it back. But I thought it was a really good looking little thing. And I love the ones that I reviewed. Excuse me again, but those videos didn't get very many views either. So I think just there wasn't a lot of interest in them, and it's kind of a bummer. I think it's a really cool project that, I'm glad that Fiat actually took the chance, even if it didn't pay off. It was a cool little thing. And Samuel says, would you buy a Volvo XC60 or Lexus RX 350? Lexus, if you plan to keep it beyond a lease period. Volvo, if you value safety above everything else, and you plan to lease a new one. If that's the case, I honestly like the XC60 better. I think it handles better. I think it's better looking. I think the interior is nicer. I like, between the two of them, without any of the other considerations, I think I would pick the Volvo easily. But if you're looking for reliability, the Lexus is definitely the better choice. Brant says, hey Matt, I'm really looking into getting a manual V8. What would you recommend under 20 grand? Mustang, Camaro, Challenger. That's basically, I guess your only choice is as far as stuff that's relatively new, unless you want to go back to some really old stuff. Honestly, I think the manual V8 though is a really fun, vehicle, with the Mustang or the Camaro. You can't go wrong with either one of those. And I think you can get even the newest generation potentially under $20,000 if you're getting an older one with some higher miles. And then you can even go back to the previous generations of those vehicles, which were also great, also fantastic, manual V8s for under 20 grand. And Noel also suggests the C6 Corvette. Corvette is also, a good choice as well. As long as you don't care about having a back seat, and also the fact the Corvette doesn't have as much safety tech. There's no side curtain airbags in the Corvette like there is in the Mustang and Camaros. Even those older versions had it. So, so that's the only other consideration. But otherwise, Corvette is another great choice for sure. A Wheel says, what do you think of the Mitsubishi Lancer Rally Art? I did a review on one a while back. It was fun. I'm trying to remember what my holdups were with it. I think just the handling was just so much more different than the Evo that the whole time I was just like, man, I wish I was back in an Evo instead of in the Rally Art. I'm sure with some mods, you can definitely get the suspension up to Evo standards. But I think that was the only complaint. Otherwise, I thought that was another very good idea that would have been a great WRX competitor, but just no one bought them. And I don't know why, but they didn't. And that's another kind of head scratcher that should have taken off, in my opinion, and never did. But I think they're cool little cars. It was a cool idea. All right. And Smile Permal says, do you think you'll be disappointed with the M235i Grand Coupe if you ever get the chance to review one? I have not heard good things about the M235i. Man, the review, I think it was, Jason Camisa did a review on one on Instagram, and it was hilarious to read. He was not a fan of that thing. And it seemed, I actually went to a BMW dealership with a friend of mine a couple of months ago and actually just walked up to one. And it's insane how small it is. Like a Mini Cooper is more spacious in the 4-door version than than that thing is. It's just like tiny, like even smaller than like an A class, smaller than an A3. It is just like strange how small it is. I don't know who's in the market for that thing. Honestly, I don't know. I don't know. It just doesn't seem like a really good idea from BMW, but who knows? Maybe it'll sell. All right. So we have Joe says, have you seen videos by JM on cars? I have not. I don't think I've ever heard of that. Rafi says, are there any podcasts that I listen to? I don't listen to podcasts, primarily because I don't do a lot of road trips anymore. Back when I did, I just kind of liked just enjoying listening to my music or listening to the sound of the Bullet V8. There's a lot of times I don't even listen to anything in the car. I just listen to the engine. But there's a lot of really interesting podcasts I've heard about and stuff. It's not like I'm opposed to podcasts, but I just never have really an opportunity to. All right, so we have Patrick Parker says, hey, Matt, I've been watching you since I was 12 and I'm 18 now. Appreciate you watching. He says, just wanted to say thanks for all the years of enjoyment. thank you for your support over the years. Again, it all goes back to you guys watching the videos. That's how I continue to be able to do this. And so I'm just as indebted to you. I very, very much appreciate everyone that continues to watch. Like I said earlier, there's so many good choices these days for reviews. I know there's lots of people that have fancier camera angles and fancier cameras and fancier cars and everything else. And I appreciate everyone that continues to, watch the videos and care about my opinions on cars. And, hopefully the reviews are still helpful for you guys. I'll continue doing them as long as I can. And Jake says, I think the biggest problem with the 1 and 2 series is that it is replacing a car known first and foremost for being fun to drive and one of the only 6-cylinder rear-wheel drive cars in its segment. Yeah, but I think honestly, at least here in the States, the old 2 Series was so much of a niche vehicle. They sold so few of them that I honestly think that people are coming into the 2 Series with this new version with a completely untainted view of what a 2 Series should be. I don't think the average 2 Series Grand Coupe buyer even knows a 2 Series existed before that car. And if they do, then I'm sure it's a whole different idea for them. But I think mostly they're just going after someone who's like, oh, I want a BMW badge in something that's smaller than a Corolla. And so, if they can afford it for 35 grand, 40 grand, whatever it ends up being with discounts and stuff, they're guessing they'll sell some to people that are excited about that and don't care about driving dynamics and stuff and don't care that it's front wheel drive, don't care that it's a 4-cylinder. And it's essentially just for that badge and, the styling and the tech and stuff as well. It's not just a bragging thing or anything, but I think, that has a lot of sway with a lot of people to say you drive a BMW. And so the cheaper they can get that price point so that you can get more of those people, the better off they are. But I just think that, Mercedes and Audi both do the same exact thing in a much better fashion. Mari says, I'll be living in Japan after I graduate college and looking for a job. What sports car should I consider saving up buying? I've always been a fan of the Skyline GTR. That's exactly what I would buy. Get an R34 GTR, 100% go for it. And even if you get bored with it after a couple of years, once those are allowed to be legally imported here in, 3 or 4 years, I think, 20... because they came out in 99, so that would make it 2024. You can start importing those. I'm not sure, something like that. But anyway, I think at that point you could export it and make a boatload of money. Just wait. I mean, there is going to be 1,000,001 people that are going to buy an R34 GTR once they're legal here in the States. Everyone's going to have one. Everyone's going to do a vlog. It's going to be like the C8 Corvette and all that, and the Supra. Like, it's going to be the car of that year, and prices are going to go through the roof on those things here in the States once you can finally buy one. So I would definitely recommend that, both from a business standpoint and from a just fun, awesome, epic standpoint. And if you've always loved it as well, 100% get an R34 GTR. That would be amazing. And I reviewed the R32 GTR many years ago, and that was a ton of fun. So if it's just that, but newer, it's got to be amazing. So I would definitely say, definitely go for that. And that's awesome. You're moving to Japan. That's really cool. It's something I've always wanted to visit Japan. It just seems like such a cool place. Yeah. So anyway, Noel says, yeah, it's crazy how long I've been watching you, Matt. It reminds me of my younger days in the infancy of YouTube. Yeah, YouTube's changed so much in the past 10 years here. It's kind of wild how different everything is from the way it used to be. And thank you so much for continuing to watch too, Noel. I really appreciate it. And Theodore says, why do you think that the new SS did not sell? I got one and it's amazing. That's another example of me I think with the SS, it made a little more sense why it didn't take off. The styling just wasn't there for most people. The name was kind of ambiguous. And, I think here's the thing, if they would have marketed the SS, if they would have given it the Chevelle name, and then they made it look even half as cool as the Dodge Charger I know it has like the fender flares and stuff. It's not like the SS is not a cool looking car, but just it looked too much like a Malibu for most people, sadly. And if they would have made it really aggressive and, they don't even have to change a lot. Even if they just gave it, new headlights, new front bumper, new rear bumper, new taillights, called it a day, I think they would have sold a lot more. And it could have potentially turned into a Charger situation where they sold them for years and years and years. And and all that. I loved the SS, and I think the SS handles way better than the Charger, even with the wide body version. I think the SS still is the better handling car. You could get it with a manual, which was amazing. And it just drove really good. It sounded really good. You had the active exhaust the last year. I think they 100% had the formula right. They just marketing, name, and styling are the three things I think that killed the SS, sadly. Because otherwise, like I said, it was amazing, and hopefully you're enjoying yours still. All right. And we have Garrett says, I wish they would have made the 2 Series Grand Coupe a rear-wheel drive hatch, rear-wheel drive hatch. Well, that's basically what it is in Europe, right? I believe there's a rear-wheel drive one, or there used to be. Maybe they changed it over there too. But he said it might have been tough to do that with a usable back seat. I heard rear-wheel drive 1 Series in Europe had a tight back seat. Okay, yeah, maybe it's the 1 Series I'm thinking of with the hatch and rear-wheel drive. But I mean, yeah, a tight back seat, but the 2 Series Grand Coupe, that back seat is basically useless unless you're a really short person sitting up front. I mean, I didn't even sit in it, but just looking at it in the parking lot and staring into that back seat, I'm like, who can sit back there? Like, it's like fit for like small dogs, and that's it. It seems like, again, I'll have to try one out to truly say, but I don't know. They made that car way too small, in my opinion. But yeah, I appreciate all the comments and the discussion going on here. This is a lot of fun. Hopefully you guys are enjoying it as well. Got another 20 minutes or so to go here before we'll probably wrap it up. And so Sean B says, Matt, if you had to get a truck, which and what trim level would you buy? Well, yes, I would never buy one, but if I had to get a truck, I would probably do a Ram 1500. Trim wise, I mean, that kind of comes down to money. Obviously, I would go for a fully loaded one if money were no object. But as far as, I can't remember which trim was the best value, and I remember looking at them a while back. But I think I would probably do, I think it's the Longhorn trim. It's the one that seems to like have a happy medium. But yeah, I would do a Ram 1500. I think it's the best looking, the best riding, the most luxurious truck for the money. Hands down, I would go for a Ram. Stay Chilled Out says favorite Subaru. Probably still the Impreza 22B, the little 2-door Impreza that was wide body and stuff back in the day. That's probably still my favorite of all time. Outside of that, honestly, I think nowadays the BRZ has been the favorite in my opinion. It's still such a fun car, and I know it's too slow for a lot of people, but if you can get beyond that, it's just so good. And the WRX is really fun. As the years have gone by and there's been new competitors to the WRX, I think that if you don't need all-wheel drive, there's just some better buys than the WRX these days. So I think that's why I'm just not super in love with the current gen WRX. So I think BRZ outside of the 22B. And Jazzbo says, do you like Volvo automobiles? What are the pros and cons of that brand? The big pro is safety. Volvo is hands down the safest. Them and Mercedes are kind of the top of the pack as far as safety. But like Volvo, it's crazy. I think Alex on Autos was actually telling me a while back that I think Volvo, they actually ran old Volvos through like the newest safety, like the IHS, like the small overlap crash test. Like they ran the old Volvos through that before that was ever a test. And the Volvo passed with flying colors, because Volvo and Mercedes, I believe Alex said, are the only two brands that actually do safety by their own standards, not the government and the IHS standards. Everyone else, it's like, oh, well, now we have to make it so it can withstand a small overlap crash test because that's what the IHS is doing. So everyone's like, oh, this is bad. Let's hurry up and fix it. Like the Ford Explorer is a perfect example. The brand new Ford Explorer, even though they knew that test was required, for the new testing and stuff, the Ford Explorer got like a marginal rating for small overlap crash test. You're talking about a family SUV, and then like Ford hurried up and went back and restyled the bumper beam behind the front bumper. And then we're like, okay, run it again. And then they ran it through the test again. And now it has a good or acceptable rating or something like that. But that's just one example of how they're like, okay, we'll make it safe enough. This should be fine. And then they're like, oh crap, this failed. And there's multiple vehicles. It's not just Ford where you see it gets a bad rating, and then they go back to the drawing board and hurry up and like you add more bumper beam or whatever they have to do, and then they're like, okay, run it again, and then the IHS has to be like, okay, this is a good rating. If you're buying one after May of 2020 or whatever, then it's, you know, a build date that's safe or whatever. But Volvo and Mercedes do their own standards, and that's why you put those old vehicles through the new tests they usually pass. And so that's the big thing on Volvo, is they're super safe. The cons are that they're like any other European brand. They can have electrical gremlins after a few years. So I would recommend only leasing a Volvo because it seems like they can get a little quirky as they get old. But other than that, I think they're really good vehicles. They drive great. They look great. The tech's great now too. Everything about them is fantastic. And I'm actually excited. I'm going to be having a Volvo, the V60 T8 Polestar engineered coming in here in about a week and a half. I'm excited to try that out because the T8 power plant, you know, has in the Polestar version, it's 415 horsepower. And I've only driven the T8 versions of all the SUVs. And in a smaller, you know, V60 station wagon, it should be really punchy and really fun. So I'm excited about that. That's a review that probably no one's going to watch because Volvos aren't exciting for a lot of people on my channel, but I'm excited personally to review that one because I think it's going to be a really cool combo. Get a plug-in hybrid, 415 horsepower wagon that's also super safe, super good looking, and has super good tech. Just like a win-win-win-win-win in my opinion. Just all the wins. So I think Volvo is pretty awesome. All right, so we have Robert says, how did you and Beth meet? We actually met on a movie set. So we were both extras in several different movies that were filming in Pittsburgh back in 2014. I mean, both of us were even doing it earlier than that. I think my first one was in 2010. I think hers was, you know, maybe 2010 or 2011. But so we were just extras on a movie set, and it was a movie that was filming for like a week straight, and they were using all of us extras the same, like over and over again, which is very rare. Usually you're on a set for 1 or 2 days, you're in 1 or 2 scenes, and then they don't want you to be in all of the scenes. They don't want to have the same people in the background of, you know, all the different scenes. It doesn't make any sense. So, but with this movie, it did make sense to have us there. And so it was this rare combination of, you know, being on a set for, you know, 12 to 16 hours a day with the same people. You get to talking a lot because it's very much a hurry up and wait environment being on a movie set, where you're sitting in a holding area for 4 hours, and then they're like, okay, hurry up and go to set. And you're there for 30 minutes and like, oh, okay, we need to go back and reset everything, like go back into holding, and you sit there for another 4 hours. So it's a really good place to meet people. So we met there and we hung out basically every day on the movie set. And then basically every day after that, we kept hanging out and just kind of hit it off from there. But that's how we met. A Wheel says, I know this is kind of a huge question, but what do you think is your favorite car review? Yeah, that's so hard because there's so many that are really fun in different ways. Like, you know, the R32 GTR was the first right-hand drive vehicle that I ever reviewed. You know, so you have stuff like that stands out. The Jaguar F-Type R is just one of my favorite cars, so that stands out. The GT350 was pure magic. A lot of the press trips I've done have been a ton of fun too, because you get to do track driving as well. Like the GT500 review was amazing because we got to take it down a drag strip, and then we got to do a huge burnout in it, and then we got to take it, you know, around an actual circuit, and then we got to go canyon carving in it. And so it like gives you all the fun and stuff, and you get to really experience everything the car can do, and it gives you a whole new respect for it. The C8 Corvette launch was another one that, you know, amazing fun time. That one was also a highlight because I was able to be drive partners with Shmi 150, which was amazing. I've met him multiple times in the past, but getting to spend an entire day driving around with him was just super cool. And the C8 was super cool as well. And then the next day we drove the C8s around the track all day. And it was on a track that I knew very well because I had done a driving school there. And so that one was a lot of fun. But there's been a lot over the years that, you know, some of them that, you know, private owners have offered that I've been able to review that have been a ton of fun, you know, reviewing like Street Speed 717's Corvette ZR1, his first ZR1 that he had. That was a ton of fun, you know, kind of hanging out with him and reviewing his cars. And, yeah, there's just been so many fun opportunities that I've had and so many awesome people that I've met. That's a huge fun part of it as well. And so there's a a lot of highlights, a lot of good stuff. But I'm very fortunate when I look back. I mean, the NSX was another one this summer. It was like one of those pinch me moments. Like I actually have an NSX in my garage. Like, how is this real life? So there's just so many things. I'm very, very fortunate and thankful that I've been able to do this and had all these amazing experiences. And again, it all goes back to you guys watching the videos. If you didn't watch, if you didn't subscribe, companies wouldn't give me the press cars. I wouldn't have these opportunities. And so it all goes back to you guys. So I thank you all again so much for continuing to support the channel. Noel says it's been a long time since he's driven a Volvo. The center console that waterfalls down from the radio to the armrest is amazing. Yeah, their infotainment's amazing. Everything is really top notch, I think. Yeah, so Rafi says, what kind of computer do you use for editing? I have an iMac. You can actually see it here. That's my iMac, and it's a 27-inch one. It's from like 2015, so it's not new or anything, but it's what I use. And then I use Adobe Premiere Pro for my editing software, and that's what I use. Nothing crazy. It keeps up just fine since I only do my videos in 1080p and I don't do 4K and stuff. So it does pretty good. It's every once in a while it'll get a little slow these days, but overall it's still been holding up really well. All right, so we have Jiga Jenks says, I wonder how you felt when you had the LP570 Superleggera. That one was a lot of fun too. That was a strange review though, because that one was when I was really first starting to review cars. And that person that owned that, I reviewed their E92 M3, and I thought that was all that I was going to review. I knew he had the Lamborghini, but I wasn't expecting him to offer it. He had not offered it at that point. And so I just did the M3, and he's like, oh, well, like, yeah, you can review the Superleggera too if you want. And I'm like, oh, okay. And I was kind of running out of time. And so I didn't have a lot of really good roads. It was also in Columbus, Ohio, where there's not a lot of really good roads right around there. You kind of have to drive to like Hocking Hills or something to get some good roads. So I didn't really get a good taste of the Superleggera in that review. I had a friend that owned one, so I rode in it plenty of times. But yeah, it was just kind of stressful because I was like stuck in traffic for half of the review, and then when I actually had some free space, it wasn't great. But back when I was, in those early days of the reviews, I didn't really have a whole lot of, I didn't have a lot of opportunities. And so, especially that someone being like, hey, drive my Lamborghini whenever I'm like, I'm an unknown reviewer. It's just kind of was mind blowing. So that was a lot of fun. But it would be nice to kind of go back and review one again someday. And actually go into it now on good roads, knowing what I know, having the better driving experience under my belt that I do now, because back then I had never done a driving school. I was still very much a novice as far as reviewing cars. So I'd love to go back and redo one of those someday for sure. Joji says, do you think the USA will get the M3 Touring? I doubt it. It doesn't sound like it's likely, just because from a crash standpoint, they have to certify the wagon body style for the 3 Series. And unless they plan to sell the regular 3 Series in a wagon here, which they haven't to this date, so far. So unless they change course on that, it's just going to be too much to certify it. They would have to, if they wanted to cover the cost of certifying it, they would be way too expensive and then no one would buy it. So I don't think it's going to come here, sadly, which is kind of a bummer, but I'm just glad they're doing a manual with the new M3. That alone is a gift on its own. So I'm just happy they're doing that. Rafi says, is there a car you'd love to do a quick drive on again, even if you already made a review of it? I don't know. I don't think there's... See, usually like I try and cover new vehicles because I'm trying to cast my net as far as I can, as far as, reaching as many people and as many car buyers as I can. So I always try and do new vehicles. But stuff that I would like to do a quick drive in just for selfish reasons. I would love to drive another F-Type just because I want to drive F-Types all the time. Any of the supercars, any of the, really unique stuff. I'd love to drive an R32 again, do something like that. And I'd like to do an R33, but I haven't even reviewed that yet. But otherwise, I can't think of anything off the top of my head that I already reviewed that I'd love to drive again. Generally, like once I review it, I kind of like put it in the back of my mind. I'm like, okay, that one's done. Let's move on to the next one. Let's try and get everything, cover as much as I possibly can. But yeah, and Wretched Drake says, which classic muscle car would you love to own someday? I'd love to own a 68 Mustang Fastback, just like the one in Bullet. That is, my ultimate classic dream car. As far as muscle cars go, I also would love other classic like cruisers from the 40s and the 50s because I'm one of these weird people that likes, that old, really old stuff. I know very few people my age like those kind of vehicles. But I love the fins on all those 50s cars and the colorful, vehicles that have teal blue interiors and all that kind of stuff. I love all that. So I would love to, have a bunch of those. But as far as muscle cars go, there's a lot of fun stuff. But I would definitely, I think, just want a 68 Mustang Fastback. Mari says, what is your opinion on the Nissan Aria, Matt? It looks really promising. I'm gonna be curious to drive one whenever they're out and see how it is. But I think, that's going to be very competitive. I just don't know how big of a market there really is going to be for electric cars not called Tesla right now. Like, obviously, Tesla has their own thing going for them. They have their cult following. I mean, the Mustang Mach-E seems to be a good indicator that there's a lot of people, but that also could be a lot of Mustang people as well, because you have that built-in fan base that kind of, helps that as well. So the Nissan, it's a totally new name, totally new brand. It's totally unknown. We'll have to see how it does. Same thing with the Volkswagen ID4 that just, was debuted. We'll have to see how they do. Do people actually want something they can only drive 200 miles? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But they're trying. They're going to put it out there, and that's the thing. You put it out there, see what happens. And even if it doesn't take off immediately, eventually, that's going to be the norm, I think, eventually. So that will give them time to refine it. And so these companies are getting started really early, like Ford and Nissan and Volkswagen. Hopefully by the time people are more open to that stuff, maybe in 5-10 years or whatever, they'll have already hit the ground running and have all the bugs worked out and kind of be on the next generation of those vehicles and stuff. So we'll have to see. But it looks good though, that's for sure. Queasy, thank you so much for the super chat. He says, use 2011 to 2014 Challenger RT or 2011 to 2014 Mustang 5.0. So I would say 5.0 Mustang if you're wanting the best handling and the most, I'd say just if you actually want a little bit of handling with your muscle car, then that's the way to go. The Challenger is going to be the better bet if you like a larger vehicle. If you're going to be, using the back seat, the Challenger back seat's way better. The Challenger trunk is way better. All that type of stuff. I personally like the interior better in the Mustang of that generation than the Challenger. The Challenger in that generation was kind of bland and kind of just copy and paste Dodge stuff. It wasn't super full of character like it is with the newer Challengers now. So there's that. Personally, I would pick the Mustang. I have a little bit of bias, so that's probably not totally fair, but I think practicality-wise, the Challenger would be the better choice too. So just comes down to what your preference is. And also, since the Mustang has the 5.0, I also have to once again say the 5.0 Mustang, those engines rev really high. That's what they like. They don't have a ton of low-end torque. The Challenger does have a lot of low-end torque. And so, those are much easier to shred the tires and do burnouts and stuff because they're just boatloads of torque as soon as you tap on the gas. And the Mustang, you don't get that as much. So if you want that instant throw you in the back of your seat, Challenger. If you want the let's go to $7,000 thing, the Mustang is going to be the better choice. So it just comes down to, what your driving style is, I guess, too. He says he does like the interiors more with the Mustang, maybe even the 3.7 as a backup. Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with V6 Mustang. Everyone loves to make fun of them online, and that's just the car community. It is what it is. But the V6 Mustangs, I think, are a really good choice. They actually sound really good for a V6, especially with an exhaust. They're reliable. It's good power. That newest 3.7, before they killed it off, it was doing 300 horsepower, which just the previous, not even full generation, just a few years earlier in the V8s was doing the same horsepower. And yet everyone still is bashing the V6 Mustangs. It's a fantastic motor. It's a great choice, I think, still. 100%. I think that V6 is great in those Mustangs if that's something you're open to. I think it's a really good choice. Let me see. We have Brandon says car shopping is one of the hardest things if you want a good deal. MSRP, invoice, discounts, etc. Do you see the endless battles with salesmen in the future, or will we ever get to a CarMax type sale? I really think that there's two types of people. There's people that truly do hate the whole haggling process and they don't want to deal with that. Those people, I think, will go to like either a CarMax type place, or I think, especially now in the COVID era, they'll just go and do, Carvana, Vroom, or whatever all these other online car buying things are. I really think that is the future, because I know that a car purchase is much bigger than buying something on Amazon is, but it's all about convenience. And especially with modern cars, it's not like, even, 15, 20 years ago where something really drove terribly, or it was a lemon, or it was just junk. If you're buying a modern car that's only, 5 years old or less, it's going to drive nice. It's going to have good handling, because all modern cars handle pretty well, drive pretty well, generally have enough power. And so, the need for test drives and really digging into a car, I mean, if you are an enthusiast like we are, you want to feel what the handling's like. You want to feel how the power delivery is like. But for the average commuter, they don't care. It's just like, oh, that looks nice. It has the features I want. It has enough USB jacks. Let's buy it. And it's just something as simple as that for a lot of people. And so I think there's those people that will go for the CarMax and the online stuff. But I think there's a lot of people that actually enjoy the negotiations. They like the idea that they're getting a good deal. That's why Chevy and all of GM does these 10 to 15% discounts off MSRP. People like the idea that I didn't pay full price for something. And that goes for anything. People just want a discount on something. And even if it's the illusion of a discount, like with GM, most of the time, the discount just makes it actually competitive. But people can say, wow, this was a 50 grand Blazer. It's like no one in their right mind pays 50 grand for a Blazer, but it's a $50,000 car and I got it for $40,000. Like, look at me, I'm a real good negotiator. And I think that's how GM sells a lot of cars personally. That's just my hunch. I don't know for a fact, but there's some of that going on. And I think there's a lot of people that do enjoy, all of this salesman's out to get me. So I'm going to, screw him first and, all this kind of stuff. So there's that kind of thing that I think goes on. I think those people will always love that negotiation. They want a deal. They want to, feel like they're the victor, and, they like the competition of it. And so I think those people, will keep a lot of the traditional dealer model alive for a while. And it just comes down to personal preference and personality types, I think, But I mean, when I worked at all the dealerships, I wasn't a salesman ever, but especially when I worked at the used car dealerships, seeing, the questions that people asked and just the way that people were trying to negotiate it's really funny. And a lot of like the dealer I worked at, Harrison Auto Sales, a lot of times they were just like, we have the lowest price out there already. Like, it's a good price. If you like it, great. If you don't, go buy one of the other ones that's more expensive. Like, they were very straightforward with that. And it's not like, they didn't negotiate, but, I think dealers would be better off just doing a good price right off the bat. The manufacturers should just have a good price off the bat. The dealer says, look, our salesmen need to get paid too, so they can survive. So like, we're not giving this car away for free, but here it is, it's $500 over invoice or whatever it ends up being. And that's it. But I think, a lot of people just, again, they always want to feel like they're getting a better deal, but it is what it is. Another little tangent. And with that tangent, we are actually over 2 hours here. So maybe I'll do one more question here since I kind of was going off there on that one. But let me see here. Monopoly says, except the Mirage as far as good modern cars. That is true. The Mirage does not seem great, although I've not driven one, so I cannot definitively say. But it doesn't seem like a great combo there. Anyway, all right. Last question here. I guess we'll pick Saucy. He says, how do you deal with / feel about all the Mustang slander? I just bought a 5.0 and didn't realize how many people make fun of it. Yeah, I think a lot of it is the whole cars and coffee thing of people crashing them. And I think, it just comes down to the fact that the Mustang is a very affordable, obtainable vehicle for a lot of people that sometimes has more power than people have skill. And, it's just, that's kind of the case with anything. If you're having an affordable car with tons of horsepower, there's going to be people that, it's not that there's anything wrong with an affordable car with tons of power, but it's just that that makes it more accessible, especially to younger people who are less experienced with driving high performance vehicles. And so I think, that's just unfortunately just because the Mustang is such a good value, you just get some of that happening. And why it happens more with the Mustang than the Camaro or the Corvette or something, I don't know. But I don't really pay much attention to any of that stuff. And even whenever I had the Bullet, when I first got the Bullet, one of the first car shows I went to, I just parked it up. It was like brand new, and I backed it in. So you just saw the blank grill, and someone walked by and was like, "Wow, that's just an EcoBoost," and kept walking because they thought they were an expert, and clearly they knew what an EcoBoost grill looked like, but didn't know that the Bullet was a thing, even though it had already been out for 6 months at that point. But you're going to have dumb people that make stupid comments, and trust me, I know that more than anyone on this channel. The amount of dumb stuff I get commented on every single day, not even on just the newer videos, but on the old videos that people are watching a video 7 years later or something, and some of the dumb comments, it's just, people have their biases. People are going to hate anything no matter how good it is. It's just, everyone has different opinions, and unfortunately, with the age of the internet, everyone can voice that opinion very easily. And it's just, you got to grow a thick skin, buy what you like, do what you like, do what works for you. Don't worry about what other people think, especially when it comes to cars, because you're buying it for you. You're the one driving it, not them. So if you love it, just shut out all the haters. And that goes for mods too. Some people don't like one type of mod style or something, but again, if it makes you happy, go for it. That's live and let live is my motto, and I wish more people agreed, but it is what it is. But yeah. So anyway, we will wrap it up at that. Try and keep a thick skin. That's definitely the best way to go about it. And that's one thing that I had to do with this channel, especially because lots of criticism all the time. But yeah, so thank you guys for joining the live stream here. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you guys continue to have a good rest of your weekend here and a good week, and continue to stay safe and healthy. And I'll see you guys for the next one. We'll do another live stream here in November. I've been loving doing these every month. I think it's a lot of fun. Hopefully you guys enjoy it as well. But yeah, anyway, thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Please continue to keep watching the videos and subscribing. It really does truly help. So thank you all for your support, and take care.